Bienvenidos, welcome. Everyone, please take a seat. We're ready to kick off Latinas Represent Boston. Welcome, welcome. My name is Melissa Luna. I am the Deputy Director for Political Parity at Hunt Alternatives. And I would like to take a moment to thank our co-sponsors and host committee members. If our host committee members could please rise. Thank you for all your hard work. We are here to build Latina political leadership and representation, and it is with their support of our co-sponsors and our host committee members that today was made possible. So I want to give them my sincerest thanks for all your hard work. Before we get started, I would like to do and offer a special thank you to Dean Ira Jackson from the John W. McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies, the home of the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy. He is here today to officially welcome us on behalf of the university. Dean Jackson's career has spanned the public and private sectors, as well as academia. And you're anxious to join us today. Before his most recent appointment as Distinguished Scholar at MIT, Dean Jackson served as Dean and Professor of Management at Claremont Graduate University in California. From 1987 to 1999, he was Executive Vice President of Bank Boston. He also served as Massachusetts Commissioner of Revenue under Governor Michael Dukakis and was previously Chief of Staff for Boston Mayor Kevin White. And with that, I'd like to welcome Ira Jackson.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Bienvenidos, mujeres. Qué fantástico que estamos en Boston para esta conferencia. We are thrilled to have you here. And on behalf of our provost, Winston Langley, and Winston, would you allow us to acknowledge your presence, please? The chief academic officer of the University of Massachusetts, Boston. We are very proud to host Latinas Represent here at our home. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with the University of Massachusetts, Boston, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. At a recent event not far from here, Vicki Kennedy stood and said the following: here on the beautiful campus of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, looking out at, and if we could see just beyond that screen, if it were open, the magnificent home of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and the new home about to be inaugurated at the end of March of the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the Study of the United States Senate, Columbia Point is the place to be. So we're happy to have you here at our home on Columbia Point on our 50th anniversary. And I think it's not an exaggeration to say that as the university is rising, so are all of you. And we're emerging and rising at the same time. And we're thrilled to be joined at the hip, so to speak, with this organization and all of you who are committed to the same values that we are: community engagement, urban progress, a more representative and effective democracy where all parties are represented. My role, and I won't filibuster, I was trying to take the stage to get on to the main event, but I want to acknowledge a couple of incredible pioneering women, in particular Swanee Hunt, former Ambassador Swanee Hunt, and former Lieutenant Governor Kerry Healy, now president of Babson University College. And it's their incredible vision of a changed landscape where women, especially women of color and men, contribute more fully to our system of democracy that brings us all together. And I want to particularly thank both of them, Governor Healy and Ambassador Hunt, for serving on our leadership council at the McCormick Graduate School, where I am proud to serve as the dean. This conference builds upon the momentum generated by other Latinas Represent events held around the country. I know that your participation today will propel many more women into public leadership positions in Massachusetts and beyond. We clearly have a long way to go as a nation and here in our Commonwealth. Only one Latina has ever held a state representative seat, and only one has held a state Senate seat. We all know that she's terrific, But if Latinas were represented in the same numbers in the Massachusetts State Senate that they are in our population, there would be twice as many Chang Diaz's in the state Senate, and there would be none but 9 Latinas in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. So we've got a long way to go, given that the Latino population is more than 10% of our state's population, and we have to utilize the talents of all in order to solve the pressing issues today. Again, my role is largely honorific in thanking co-sponsors, the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, for partnering with Political Parity to launch Latinas Represent. I also want to recognize the commitment of the Mauricio Gaston Institute for Latino Community Development and Public Policy here at UMass Boston for co-sponsoring this event. I also acknowledge the Women's Pipeline for Change, a statewide coalition that works closely with the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy. Yes, let's hear it for them. The pipeline is creating an infrastructure to support women of color as they enter, navigate, and move up the pipeline of public leadership. Thank you, Maria Jobin-Leeds, for incubating the pipeline and bringing resources to this transformative and cutting-edge work. Winston Langley and I, a year ago, extended an invitation to a remarkable woman who's an academic activist and a 30-year pioneer in this field to be director of the Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy. We're so grateful that Professor Ann Bookman accepted our offer and that she is director of our Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy. It's my pleasure now to introduce her to you, Ann Bookman.
Good afternoon. I don't have quite the Spanish that Dean Jackson does, so I won't even try. On behalf of the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy, I would like to welcome everyone to the UMass campus in Boston. I can tell that you're a very determined group of women because you navigated the parking on our campus. And thank you for putting up with this unprecedented period of construction. I hope you did not encounter any difficulties, but I do note your determination to be here. I would like to also join with Dean Jackson in recognizing 3 extraordinary women who are seated right here at a table together: Ambassador Swanee Hunt, former Lieutenant Governor Carrie Healy, and Maria Jobin-Leeds. Each of these women, in her own way, has demonstrated an extraordinary level of commitment to increasing the representation of women of color in our democracy. We are incredibly grateful for your vision and your leadership. We are very excited today to be partnering with Political Parity and the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda to bring this national effort, Latinas Represent, to Boston, to Massachusetts, and New England. We are very pleased to be co-hosting this convening with our colleague at UMass Boston, Maria Idali-Torres, who has done so much at the Gaston Institute to bring the voices of Latina women to the fore. In addition, I want to acknowledge Provost Langley, who is such a wonderful supporter of the Center for Women in Politics. And I also want to thank our special partners at the Women's Pipeline for Change for their pioneering work to advance the leadership of women of color in the public sphere. The Center for Women in Politics is committed to building on the momentum of this day, and I know there's a lot of energy in this room, and to work with everybody here and those who are leading efforts in other parts of the country to promote Latina political leadership. This event aims to bring together Latinas aspiring to public leadership positions with their allies, and to forge a commitment to work together so that our government at all levels, local, state, and federal, reflects the needs of Latina and Latino constituencies and communities. CWPPP, that's the initials of my center, is an enthusiastic ally and will continue to work towards a more diverse and representational government through our graduate program, our research, as well as our events and convenings. And I'd like to take just a moment to mention our graduate certificate program in gender leadership and public policy that trains women to take leadership roles in the public and nonprofit sectors. It offers a rigorous academic experience along with a challenging internship placement. Each cohort is diverse. This year's, it's 53% women of color, and we count many distinguished women of color among our alumni. And for those of you who want more information, please visit our table at the back of the room and meet the Assistant Program Director, Muna Killingback. I'm not sure where she is. She's raising her hand there at the back, who would love to answer any questions that you have about the program. Building on the scholarship on Latinas in Politics done by the center's previous director, Carol Hardy-Fanta, and I know many of you know of her work, we will continue to conduct research that addresses the unique and complex realities faced by women of color in the public sphere. Some of you may be familiar with our Pathways to Public Leadership project, a collaborative endeavor of the Center for Women in Politics and the Women's Pipeline for Change. And I'm very excited to say that we've just begun a new research partnership with the Women's Pipeline for Change to document the history of women of color elected in Massachusetts since 1970, and the dynamic process whereby women of color become part of the political pipeline leading to elective office. I hope you will find the fact sheet on Latina women produced for this event, which is at the back table, informative and helpful to your work. It really emphasizes locally elected women, which I think is a very important complement to some of our concerns about women at the state and federal level. Today's program is intended to provide insight about the challenges that face Latinas interested in seeking elected or appointed office. More importantly, it affords us an opportunity to consider what we can do collectively to change the political landscape of the Commonwealth. Yes, that's what we're about, changing the political landscape of the Commonwealth. We hope that you begin talking about this with others, that you have already talked with others at your lunch table about this, and we will have facilitated discussions from 4 to 5. So please plan to stay for this important conversation about strategy and next steps. Very, very important that you stay and be a part of that. I'm looking forward to that moment, which will set the stage for the work that we have ahead of us to realize our goals of inclusivity, fairness, and access. Today, we begin to see the possibilities. Tomorrow and in the months to come, we will act on them with a new sense of purpose, new energy, and new relationships that we are forming today. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Marnie Allen, Director of Political Parity, who will present findings from her organization's landmark report on the political representation of Latinas in the United States. Before joining Ambassador Hunt, she was previously the Director of Policy and Research at the 21st Century School Fund, a DC-based nonprofit focused on the improvement of public school facilities. Marnie's professional work spans the fields of urban policy, nonprofit management, and women's political engagement. She has played an important leadership role in reshaping the political landscape for women across the country. Marnie Allen.
All right. Just for a change of scenery, I'm going to stand away from the podium so that you will indulge me in one more set of thank yous before I dive into the report findings. Dean Jackson, and thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge our partners here at UMass Boston. We really, truly appreciate the enthusiasm, the energy, and the support that you've had since we first talked about this project probably 4 to 6 months ago. So we greatly appreciate your partnership. And where is Krista Kelleher? Krista, your fingerprints are all over this. We could not have done this without you, so thank you. And of course, I would be remiss if we went any further without acknowledging the fabulous team at Political Parity who've put this together. You already heard from Melissa Luna, who's been spectacular at handling all these details. Michael Miller, Nadia Farjud, they may be in the room somewhere. If you are, give a wave. And the rest of our staff from Hunt Alternatives who have come to help out. So with that out of the way, let me tell you a little bit about Latinas Represent. This initiative was born of a realization, initially from Ambassador Hunt, that while there's a lot of conversation about the power of women as a voting bloc and the power of Hispanics as a voting bloc, there is not nearly enough attention paid in the political dialogue to what those two groups could do as political leaders. So we started Latinas Represent to really understand how we could change the face of politics so that we would see more Latinas holding public office around the country. And with that idea in mind, we began an exploration. We spent 6 months in 9 states, 14 different cities, in focus groups, in interviews with elected officials, with their allies, with political operatives, trying to understand what were some of the barriers that Latinas were facing as they considered careers as public servants, as they ran for office, sometimes in successful campaigns, sometimes unsuccessfully. And what I'd like to do is share a brief video with you to tell you a little bit more about the Latinas Represent story.
We're here today in Denver to launch Latinas Represent, which is a joint initiative of political parity and the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda.
Latinas Represent is really about creating a national conversation and even more sparking conversations into action to fight the fact that Latinas right now are essentially just 1% of all elected officials.
There's a huge amount of this country's population, Hispanic population in particular, that doesn't have a voice, that they're not represented at those most critical policymaking tables.
With a huge number of Latinos and Latinas in this country, we need to increase those numbers. Clearly, our Congress won't be doing its job until our elected representatives look like the America that we were elected to represent.
We've got a very small percentage in public office that are Latina and Latino. Now, when that happens, the problem is we basically don't have a voice in decisions that affect all of our lives. It's a travesty. We've got to change that.
This is about democracy and what it means for all people to be represented.
A lot of what we're going to focus on today in this workshop is going to be on how to really develop your narrative and your networks to ultimately achieve your leadership goals.
I think Latinas Represent has really helped me and a few of my peers realize how I can help younger Latinas start to represent and start to step up as well.
There is so much work to do when it comes to helping elevate the Latino voice.
We have the resources and the energy and the enthusiasm to drive a national dialogue, to unite communities and stakeholders. And we need to look for examples of success and to raise those up.
So tens of thousands of people have been following today what we've been talking about and joining into the conversation, and this is just day one.
And we need to build on what we have here in this room. We need to inspire those young people to go on and to do what so many of you have done.
Sometimes the only barriers that we have are the ones that we set for ourselves.
We just have to work. We have to work harder. We have to work deeper.
And we've got to recognize that our moms and our sisters and our cousins, our gente, we need to support them just as much as our mom would support us.
If we show our true colors and our core values are there, we're going to have success in all that we do.
We need to empower our ladies and young women to move forward and make a difference.
And it is critical that Latinas bring their special experiences and unique experiences to the policy-making table.
So we've been focusing on, one, creating the infrastructure to identify and support candidates and helping train candidates around how this process works.
We all need mentors. And one of the beauties of Latinas Represent is there's really a culture here of not just acceptance, but of support.
And if Latinas start doing that on a massive scale in terms of electoral politics, it could be transformational for our country.
What we need to do is exactly what this conference was designed to do.
To make sure that we as a coalition, that we as a community are opening the doors to an infrastructure that hasn't been working for Latinas.
I've always believed when opportunity presents itself, you need to grab hold of it.
There's a world out there, and you just have to put yourself out there to get it.
I always like watching that. I've seen it, as my husband can tell you, probably 100 times. The first few bars come on, and he's like, oh, not again. But it's a wonderful video, I think, that gives you a sense of what some of the conversation has been like. And many of the voices that you hear in that video were captured at our Denver launch event back in February. And since that time, Latinas Represent has been on the road in Los Angeles, in San Antonio, in Miami, in Washington, D.C., and we're here today in Boston. So over 700 people have already joined us in those 5 cities. And I want you all to think of yourselves as the continuation of the momentum, as part of this movement that is building around the country for Latina representation. You're about to hear some incredibly inspiring stories from electeds and candidates. Take inspiration from what you hear from them. Take courage. You will have an invitation to participate in the political process. I know we're having a workshop this afternoon on thinking about yourself as a candidate for office. As I understand, there aren't quite as many people who signed up for that as the people interested in political appointments. So give it a second thought. If you thought maybe that's not for me today, think again. As you listen to these women who are going to come up on stage, decide whether or not you're ready to follow in their footsteps. Maybe not this year, but maybe the year after or 2 years after that. Give it a thought. We're here today to celebrate and to understand and imagine together what might be possible. The need for this work, as you all know well, is so critical around the country and here in this Commonwealth. You may have seen on the screen as you were eating lunch the statistic. Since this country was founded over 200 years ago, there were 12,000 members of Congress who have been elected. Did anyone notice how many of that 12,000 have been Latinas? 10. That's unacceptable. And you heard Dean Jackson talk about what the numbers are here in Massachusetts. So we need to work together to really change that picture. What I'd like to do now is invite Ambassador Hunt to join me up here on stage. She's going to share a little bit more background on political parity and what this organization is here to do. Ambassador Hunt and I have been working together for many years now. Let me say one nice thing about you before you do. As the Eleanor Roosevelt Lecturer in Public Policy at the Kennedy School, as well as the president of Hunt Alternatives, and my boss and mentor, Ambassador Hunt has long been dedicated to elevating women's leadership and women's voices around the country, around the world, and here at home in Boston and in Eastern Massachusetts. So thank you for joining us today to add your voice to the chorus for women's representation.
Well, about the smartest thing I ever did was to ask Marnie to come on with us. She's fabulous, and I hope that each of you in the room will have a chance to spend more time with her. There's a rather sober moment that I want to make. Ira, you and I have been friends a long time. Actually, Ira's predecessor, yes, 2 predecessors back, Roger Stonebrook, he unfortunately passed away, and when he was at the pearly gates, the St. Peter said to him, you know, Roger, you've lived an exemplary life. I mean, he didn't do enough for women, right, and not enough for Latinas, but he did other good things. And when people like you come this way, we have an open invitation, and that is anyone that you want to meet, you may. Well, it didn't take him long at all. He said, I'd like to meet the Blessed Virgin. Peter said, there's actually quite a line. You know, I mean, she's very popular, but we'll make it happen. So the moment came, and Roger had his audience, and he went in and he said, you know, I won't take long. I have just one question for you. And she said, yes, sure. And he said, why? He was a fan of the arts. And so he said, I have been all over Europe and the United States and elsewhere. Why is it that you are always portrayed with this, what shall I say, this rather sober look on your face? I mean, even when you're holding your newborn, you look kind of sad, actually. Like, why wouldn't you be grinning from ear to ear? And she said to him, may I speak confidentially? And he said, of course. And she said, no, I mean, really, you may not repeat this. And he said, of course. And she said, we were really hoping for a girl. I love it. I love it. I hope you're taking this in, because seriously, we have this message as women from very early on that we're somehow second class. No, not just in the religious imagery, but when we look at the U.S. Congress and we say, well, who's giving the speeches? It's changing. It is changing. But for us in this room, we have grown up with the inculcation of Snow White. She ends up in a coffin until the prince comes along, and et cetera, et cetera. You know the stories. So here we are. I am obviously not Latina, but even for me as a privileged white person, it's very hard for me to take the plunge to think about running. And yet you think about our country and what this means. You've seen the statistics on Latinas, and I want to reiterate what Marnie said, that Latinas are courted big time, big time. We're going to get out the vote. Well, who are we going to get out? We're going to get out the Latinas, right? Because they'll bring their families along. So it's 2 months before Election Day. Okay, everybody, let's, we got some money. Let's, get our people out to go knock on doors to make sure those Latinas are coming to vote. Well, come on, give me a break. I mean, how insulting is that? If our country is going to advance, I mean, you can just be a patriot and say, we've got to have 100% of our talent pool. We've got to. We've got challenges, we've got problems, and it's not just the leadership of the 100% of the talent pool, it's the perspective that different groups bring. And it's not that women are so much better, it's not that Latinas are better than the other people in the society, but each of us, in whatever group we're in, brings a certain perspective, and that shapes legislation, it shapes policies, and guess what? It shapes you. It's a circle. It turns around and it shapes you and the people you love. So for all of those reasons, we need a responsive, we need a reflective democracy. It's not just about Latinas, it's about any group that is not represented. But we need you. That's what I want to say. In this room, it's not like you can say, oh, well, there are all these other smart people and there are all these other well-connected people. You are the people who need to think, as Marnie was saying, you need to have your 2-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 15-year plan, and seriously, I'm looking out at you all. The youngest ones in here in 15 years need to be either in the state Senate or better yet in the U.S. House of Representatives, on your way to the White House. Now I get to introduce a mentor, because one of the most important things that we have found in our research is not just that women have to be asked 7 times and not just that they're less likely to run, but they really benefit from mentors and other kinds of support. So I have a mentor here, and she's now the president of Babson, but I'll tell you that before that, she was lieutenant governor under Mitt Romney, and then in between, she ran for governor in 2006. And the reason I know this and remember it so well is I gave 2 fundraisers for her opponent. And she loves me anyway. So, Carrie Healy, would you?
Thank you, Swanee. That's much better. I just wanted to be here briefly to say hello to you, to say how proud I am to be a part of political parity. Thank you, Dean Jackson, for all of the support that you've given to this gathering and to us in general, the encouragement that you give us. Probably almost 5 years ago, is that right? That Swanee approached me about being involved in political parity, a nonprofit, nonpartisan effort to encourage women to run for office. And we weren't really sure how that was going to turn out, how we were going to do that, and what we knew there were issues. We knew there were barriers that needed to be broken. We knew that both parties had failed in their efforts to get women to successfully come forward and run for office. And we knew that we'd been trying. We'd been trying on both sides of the aisle. Perhaps the Democrats had been doing a slightly more aggressive effort to get women out and into politics and into office, but the Republicans had been trying too, and I had been an example of that, and I knew that the problems that I encountered when I ran for office were not unique. You know, some of them had to do with me as a candidate, but some of them had to do with gender and with just the general situation that any female candidate of any ethnicity encounters when you come forward and put yourself forward for public office. And so the idea that, you know, if what you're doing is failing, you've got to try something entirely new. Well, that's what Swanee was suggesting, is that we come together across party lines, across race and ethnic lines, and say, how can we change the situation for women in politics in America? It's a big question, and we've been wrestling with it for 4 or 5 years now, and finally, we are beginning to get our arms around some of those barriers, some of those things that we need to do to change things for all of us, and to make sure that 100% of our talent is represented in American politics. And that's what this is about, making sure that everyone is appropriately represented, everyone's views, everyone's talents are used. So what were some of the barriers that I felt I encountered? One of them was simply, how do I manage my life? How do I manage to take care of my children, you know, do what I need to do for my mother and my father? How do I handle my obligations to my partner? You know, how can I do all the things that I as a woman need to do and make sure that I can also serve my country or the Commonwealth? And everyone encounters this. You know, you've got a job, you've got obligations. Women do more jobs than men do on average. They are more engaged with every aspect of life and the economy. And so to add something to that, to add running for office, which is really 24/7 to that, is overwhelming. It's an overwhelming thought. So how many of you out there are thinking about running for office at some point in your life? You better put your hands up. I think I need to see more hands or I'm going to get down right now. Okay. All right, so for those of you who put up your hands, start building your network now. Start finding those people who are going to support you, because you're not going to let the other people in your life down just because you're going to run for office, but you're going to need a lot of help to do everything that you do and to do it well. And I know that the kind of folks who are here today, they never want to disappoint anyone. You never want to be less than perfect. So you're going to need a lot of help, and start building those networks of support. For those of you who didn't put your hands up, be that support network. Figure out exactly what it is that the women who want to run need and provide that, just whatever it is. And it's, you know, it's not just necessarily stuffing envelopes or standing on the street corner holding a sign. It is a whole range of activities that you can do to help women who want to run. And we need to start pulling together and creating those networks. For me, it meant living with my mother-in-law. It meant, you know, really bringing my family together around me to provide the kind of support that I needed for my children at that point in time. I couldn't have done it without my mother-in-law, and I'll tell you, as much as people cringe when I say that, the truth is, she said to me, and she's a woman in her early 70s now, she had been a high school teacher and a high school principal, and she'd always wanted to be a school superintendent, but there weren't women's school superintendents when she was trying to achieve that goal. And she said, I was never able to achieve what I wanted to do in life because I was a woman, and that opportunity wasn't available to me. I am now going to do what I can do to support you in achieving your goals. That's what she did for me. And I think those are the kinds of allies you need. So find those allies, find those women who are willing to support you to achieve your dreams and to make sure that your talents are properly used. And I would just like to make one last comment about impact. It's worthwhile running for office. It's worthwhile. The sacrifices are worthwhile. You can change things. All we ever hear about is gridlock. It's not true. If you don't care about getting credit for things, if you don't want to be on the front page of the paper every day, if you're willing to work across the aisle, you can get a lot done. Every week, someone contacts me and tells me how my work in office made a change. And I can tell you that it is the most gratifying thing I ever hear. Whether it's the impact that I had by making drunk driving laws stricter. I don't know whose lives have been saved, but I do know that drunk driving deaths have declined at least 20% since those laws passed. So what, 40 people a year alive, maybe, who wouldn't have been alive otherwise? It's worth it. That is worth it. There are still recovery high schools all over Massachusetts. There was never a place where drug-addicted youth who'd recovered could go back and attend high school and graduate and go on to college in a drug-free environment before Stephen Tolman and I founded recovery high schools. And they're still here. And they're still graduating people who are having a chance, who wouldn't have had a chance before. So whether it's healthcare reform or just getting excellence in our schools, all of these things matter. They make a long-term, profound impact on society. And I just urge you all to make the sacrifices necessary to take the risk and serve. So that's it.
Carrie and Marnie and I were in Washington where there was a similar meeting, and one of the women who was a Republican, and was she Secretary of State? Anyway, or was she in the State Senate?
State Senate.
State Senate, and she was describing how during the campaign, it was other people, other women who would bring dinner over for her kids, like something that basic, that made this imprint on her, this enormous sense of gratitude, and that's the kind of network that Carrie's talking about. That said, I am expecting that by the end of today, where there were like 5 hands that went up, I'm expecting that there are going to be 25. That's my prediction. Yes. Now, you've got to be bold. You just have to get out of your comfort zone. One of the people who teaches us that, but has done that herself, is Ileana Citron, who is the first executive director, the founder of the Women's Pipeline for Change. And she and my friend Maria Jobin Leeds have worked together for years. And I have to say, you talk about bold, Maria and I climbed Kilimanjaro last month. And so, yeah, if we can climb Kilimanjaro, you can run for office because we're part of your network.